Good evening. Welcome to the August 24th, 2022 meeting of the Historic District Commission of the City of Gaithersburg. I would ask you to please silence your phones before we begin. They can be rather distracting. I will begin by taking the roll. I will begin with the Deputy City Attorney, Mr. Johnson.
Frank Johnson here, thank you.
City Staff, Greg Mann.
Present.
City Staff, Chris Berger.
Present.
Commissioner Morgan.
Present.
Commissioner LaFrance.
Present.
Commissioner Feinstein.
Present.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Present.
I'm acting chair this evening, John Roddy, and I am present. I would declare that the record reflects that we have a quorum for the evening. I have a preliminary statement to be read. That this commission is empowered to meet and act under Article 12 of the City Code of Gaithersburg. The technical qualifications of the staff of this commission and the members of the commission are on file with the City of Gaithersburg and are available on request to any applicant, and are hereby made part of the legal record of each and every application heard today. Each application heard today is considered on its own merits and is not to be considered as establishing a precedent for any other application. The first thing we will deal with this evening is the approval of the minutes of July 27, 2022. Are there any amendments to be made? Seeing none, hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I wasn't here, so.
Anyone?
I
move to.
Do we have a second?
Go ahead, Bob.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
I just wanted to say I'm not abstaining because I did watch it. And so I know it happened, and so I'm allowed to.
All right. So the 4 in favor, 1 abstention, nobody against. It passes. All right, the first on the agenda this evening is the demolition permit application in DEMO 28359-2022. Does staff have a presentation on this?
Yes, we do. So the subject property measures 13.71 acres, and I apologize about the size of this map, but just to orient you, the Timber Brook community is located here to the north of the property, which is indicated in red. Lakelands Ridge is to the west and south, and the Muddy Branch Shopping Center is located here to the south as well. And then across Muddy Branch Road is the Shady Grove Village community. We have drone footage of the property, which I'll play while I continue speaking. And first, we are going to primarily see the main western section of the property, followed by footage of the eastern portion of the property closest to Muddy Branch Road. This application comes before the HDC in accordance with Section 24-231 of the City Code, which requires HDC review of non-designated buildings or structures 50 years or older that are proposed for demolition for potential historic or architectural significance under the criteria specified under Section 24-226. 11 of the 13 buildings on the property were built more than 50 years ago and date to the property's use as a Nike missile launch site from 1956 to 1974. The other 2 buildings date to the NIST period of occupancy, which lasted from 1975 to 2012, and they are not subject to the HDC's demolition review. The HDC has 2 options tonight: instruct the city manager to issue the demolition permit for the property, or if the HDC finds that there is reasonable probability of a property being designated by the mayor and council, then it can petition the mayor and council by a resolution drafted by staff to begin the designation process. Since the packet was posted, we received 6 additional exhibits, 5 emails from Gaithersburg residents, and some photos taken by Commissioner LaFrance. The applicant also updated their presentation, which you will now see. So let me turn off the drone presentation and switch over the computer. You can please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Philip Hummel of Miles and Stockbridge. Our firm is Land Use Counsel for applicant Pleasance Development. To my right is Ross Ostrander, Vice President, Multifamily Operations with Pleasance. And also in the audience is Clark Wagner, Vice President of Land Acquisition and Entitlement. Our team believes that the request for demolition permit should be granted for several reasons. First, there is insufficient historical or architectural significance to merit designation. Second, there is no reasonable probability of historic designation by the mayor and city council. And lastly, designation would deny the property owner of all reasonable use or cause undue economic hardship. So Mr. Berger introduced the property. You can see on the screen outlined in red. It's addressed at 770 Muddy Branch Road. As stated by Mr. Berger, contains 13.71 acres. It's a regularly shaped property and zoned MXD. We have the Timberbrook condominium community to the north, the Lakelands Ridge community to the south and west, Muddy Branch Square Shopping Center to the south, which is approximately a 12-acre shopping center with over 100,000 square feet of commercial uses. And over here is the Amberfield community. You also have Muddy Branch Road and Great Seneca Highway, both divided arterial roadways. Just to give you a different perspective, here's a view of the Lakeland Ridge community along Shadow Glen Court from the subject property, and another similar shot showing the Lakelands Ridge community. This photograph shows the proximity of the Muddy Branch Shopping Center. You can see the shopping center buildings and the surface parking lot. So here's a brief chronology of the past use of the property. The Nike missile battery W-92 launch site was constructed on the site in 1956 in the Hunting Hill community. At the time, that was a rural dairy farming region of the county. The property was then annexed into the city in 1967, and the W-92 facility went offline in 1974. In 75, NIST took over the site. They adapted it for their own use as a storage, researching, testing, and development annex. And they used the site until 2012 when they vacated it. And for about a decade, between 2012 and 22, the site was abandoned by the U.S. federal government. In 2022, Pleasance, through Muddy Branch Investments LLC, purchased the site. And they purchased the site through a GSA auction, and that point will become important later on because it goes to the reasonable probability analysis that we will present. So with that brief introduction, I will turn it over to Mr. Ostrander to talk more about the existing conditions.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
You guys have seen several aerials. This one, which was included in the record, labels the buildings, many of them with a NIST designation, which is 501, 502, and so on and so forth. And the next 20 or so slides will be gone through in that manner and referred to in that manner. I'll begin only because it's the lowest number with 501. 501 there, as you can see, circled in green. That is the generator building built in 1956. It's currently in very poor condition and it was recently vandalized. This picture doesn't show that, but we've got some slides that'll show you that later on. 502 is the pump house building. Many of you guys saw this at the site tour that we conducted. The pump house building is from 1956, and it is in very poor condition. As you can see, this is an interior shot. The roof is caved in. 521, 522, and 523 are the designation that was given by NIST to what would have otherwise been called Launch Pad 1, Launch Pad 2, and Launch Pad 3 for the Army. You can see in this image, and hopefully it's large enough that everyone can see this, Launch Pad 1 is this light-colored red rectangle, which includes 4 launching spots. It is not the outline of the subterranean silo missile magazine. You can see in this picture, it's not great, but Chris's aerial drone photograph showed that much of what you saw here from a aerial photograph from 1972 is now gone. The missile magazines and launching apparatus really are two companion pieces, and without the loading and storage racks that you can see here and the erector launchers that go along with the missiles, these facilities have become intact, they've been compromised. The loading and storage racks are what you can see here. I think you guys can see my cursor moving along, and those have been completely removed from all three of the launch pads. The erector launchers were what the missiles would sit on, and those have also been removed from the site. This is the current day, what you would see if you were at the site, and you can see that the loading and storage racks are gone, as are the erector launchers. NIST substantially modified all three of these missile magazines, including in this photograph you'll see the above grade stair tower that they constructed, and we'll call that facility 521. This is an image from inside. You'll see that the magazine has experienced continuous, over the decades, continuous water intrusion to the point now where it is very moldy and has standing water in many places. You can see the accumulated rust on the back side of the elevator doors. Facility 522, which is Launch Pad 2, was also substantially modified in that the loading and storage racks are gone, and NIST constructed both the above grade block structure for the stairwell tower as well as on the inside of the structure below. They had erected some interior framed walls. I don't have an image of that because it's very dark inside. As you guys remember, there's no light. 523 Launchpad 3 was probably the most substantially altered in that NIST built a burn tower in this location. They put the elevator doors in the down position and built a 3-story concrete masonry unit building for their research and testing. This is an interior photograph of the 2nd story of that block building, including the stairwell. And this is an image taken from inside at the lower level of that silo, and the back side of the wood framed structure that you see there. The elevator doors are permanently fixed in that down position, and you can see there's accumulated rust and rot there. That brings us to building 530, which is the barracks building. This is at the eastern side of the site. The barracks building, NIST blocked in all of the windows with concrete masonry units, substantially altering the building from its original condition when it was an Army barracks. This is the south side of that building. And this is a representative example of the interior of that structure, in which there's a lot of accumulated rust and decay. Building 531 is the hobby building. It sits to the south of the barracks building. It is overgrown. It was a hobby building, and then it was modified substantially by NIST into a fire-induced flow laboratory in 1975. Building 532 is the canine kennel. This building was constructed roughly 1967. It was used by NIST for storage, and as you can see from this image, the roof is badly decayed. Building 533 is the missile warheading building, built in 1956, modified by NIST in 1975. It was turned into a sprinkler research facility. You can see that the windows were substantially altered, and there were interior alterations to allow for the sprinkler research that they were conducting there. Building 534 is the missile assembly building, modified in NIST to be a fire materials test facility. And as you guys may recall from our site tour, this building is in ruinous condition. As you can see in this image and the one that follows, they constructed an interior, NIST constructed an interior fire materials testing facility, and the roof has now completely caved in, and that is the current condition. The solar panel storage building, built in approximately 1967, was modified by NIST in 1975 so they could store their solar panel storage. It is in poor condition. The back of the building is now open to the elements, and it was used to store, as you can see, various pieces of furniture and others that are moldy and rotten and left open to the elements. The original buildings on the property that have been previously demolished were the guardhouse, the sentry stands, the electrical substation, and as I referenced before, the loading and storage racks and the launcher erectors, which are a critical component to the launch facilities, have all been removed. Additionally, the W92 facility control site, which was a companion piece to this launch facility, has also been demolished and is now going to be Pleasant View Park. I'll let Phil take over from here.
Thank you, Ross. What you see on the screen and is noted in the record is a number, there have been a number of previous historic analyses that are relevant to the demolition permit application for us tonight. 1998, MHT, the Maryland Historical Trust, which serves as the State Historic Preservation Office, recommended against National Register eligibility for the launch site specifically. In reaching that determination, they referenced the lack of ornamentation, the small size of the facility, the lack of some standard buildings, the extent of the alterations that the original buildings underwent, and the lack of architectural integrity. As Ross mentioned, in 2014, the HDC approved a demolition permit for the W92 control site on Darnestown Road because that facility did not meet the criteria for historic or architectural significance, and that followed MHT's 2001 review that also recommended against National Register eligibility for the control site. As it relates to the NIST usage of the property, in 2021, this site was excluded from the 579-acre NIST campus that was just recently listed in the National Register. And as far as other Nike missile battery sites go in the state, MHT has reviewed several of them for National Register inclusion and determined only one, BA-18 on the Aberdeen Proving Ground, was eligible for inclusion. And we believe that BA-18 is readily distinguishable from this site. It was a larger facility than W92. BA-18 retained essential components of a Nike facility, some of those which no longer exist for W92 with the demolition of the control site. The MHT found that the BA-18 site retained high integrity within its original setting, and it was located, of course, on an active military facility with rural surroundings, which is quite in contrast to the launch site for W92. So based on MHT's review of BA-18, we see a little differently than what was in the staff report, where it stated that the control site raisings have not affected the launch site significance, because in MHT's review of BA-18, they specifically mentioned that the site retained the essential components of a Nike facility, which included the administration buildings, the radar control area, and that this supported their finding of a high degree of integrity. And as mentioned, with the demolition of the control site, those facilities for W92 no longer exist. So sections 24.231 and section 224.226 of the city code set the standard of review for the HDC. We are dealing with requests for demolition for non-designated structures that are 50 years or older. HDC is charged with reviewing the potential historic or architectural significance under the criteria listed in section 24.226B of the city code. And the HDC shall instruct the city manager either to issue the demo permit or withhold upon a reasonable probability of designation upon a petition to the mayor and city council. So historical significance, as the agency is well aware, is considered under two main categories. The first is historical and cultural significance, and the second is architectural and design significance. And each category has a number of criteria relevant to that consideration. So for historical and cultural significance, as you see on the screen, there are 4 criteria, and we'll go through each criteria in turn. As it relates to section 24-231B1, little I, applicant does not believe that the property has character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the city, county, state, or nation. The W92 facility was one of almost 300 similar Nike battery sites that were located in 29 states across the country. As was previously mentioned, MHT has determined only one former Nike missile battery facility was deemed eligible by MHT for National Register listing. It's BA18 at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. The site, even though W92 came online in 1956, the site actually wasn't annexed into the city until '67, which means that it was 10 years roughly plus after the site came online until it was annexed into the city. NIST substantially modified the original structures, as was confirmed in the pictures, and demolished others. Continuing with that sub-criteria, the site was intentionally designed to be removed from the public view. The original rural setting has been shown in the photographs has been transformed by suburbanization, which of course is in significant contrast to the BA18 facility. The demolition of the companion control site on Darnestown Road also undermines the integrity of the launch site. The poor condition of the remaining structures is well documented, and the report, which I believe is Exhibit 4 in the record, prepared by applicant's historic consultant, concluded that the facility does not meet this criterion. Moving on to the next criteria under this category, applicant does not believe that the site took place of a significant historic event. Again, it was one of 19 similar batteries in the Washington-Baltimore defense area, 16 in the state of Maryland, 3 in Virginia, and W92 was one of 3 in Montgomery County alone. None of the historic analyses that are referenced in the record reference a distinguishing event of significant historic value. Again, the use of W92 was the same as those at nearly 300 other Nike missile sites. As it relates to the NIST use of the property, the site was not included within the bounds of the NIST Historic District, and the Exhibit 4 report again also concluded that the facility doesn't meet this criterion either. As it relates to the next criteria under this category, there's nothing in the record that shows that the property is identified with a person or a group of persons who influence society. There's no distinguishing person that's referenced in historic reviews of W92 in the record, and the report concludes that the site is not directly associated with any known person or groups of persons of exceptional significance. Next, applicant does not believe that the property exemplifies the cultural, economic, social, political, or historic heritage of the city and its communities. Again, this site was one of many in the area, one of 3 in the county. It was intentionally designed for reduced visibility and limited access as a military facility. As the aerials and pictures shown in the drone footage, there's clear encroachment by modern suburban development surrounding the property. MHT's previously determined that the site is ineligible for National Register listing. We have the demolition of the W92 control site, which undermines the integrity of the W92 facility overall. It was excluded from the NIST Historic District, abandoned by the U.S. federal government for over a decade, and the report in the record concludes that the facility does not meet this criterion either. Moving on to the next category of architectural and design significance. Here we have 6 subcategories that you see on the screen. As it relates to the first, applicant does not believe the structures embody distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. The structures that exist today are unremarkable and undistinguished. They are low-slung or underground structures that are built of concrete, masonry, and steel. They use standard military design. NIST substantially altered the structures and demolished other original structures. The report concludes that this facility no longer retains architectural integrity, and also relevantly, recently, the site has been a target for vandalism and trespassing. We have some pictures showing that. You can see on the screen, you have exterior graffiti on the structures. This slide, you see a busted lock on the left and broken glass on the right. You see graffiti both on ground level and underneath. What you see on the right is underground. Again, more graffiti, both exterior and interior. And these pictures show more graffiti and a busted door. So the site has been, and these are just recently taken in July and August, showing the extent of the vandalism and trespassing at the site. Next, applicant does not believe that property structures represent the work of a master. Again, pictures show utilitarian design, represent standardized methods of construction, and the report concludes that the remaining structures, quote, are not considered the works of a master. Similarly, we don't believe that there's any substantial evidence in the record that the structures possess high artistic values, built for military purposes with plain materials, lack of ornamentation or embellishment. The original structures were heavily modified for NIST use. The remaining structures are in disrepair following over a decade of abandonment, and the report concludes that the remaining structures do not possess high artistic values. As it relates to the next criterion, applicant does not believe the structures represent a significant and distinguishing entity whose components may lack individual distinction. Basically, we interpret this criteria to mean that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And when you look at the extent of the modifications of the original structures by NIST, the demolition of other original structures, the removal of the W92's companion control site, the poor condition of the remaining structures, the exclusion from the NIST historic district, all support a conclusion along with the poor historic district, with the poor condition of the buildings, that there has been an adverse impact to the facility's integrity, and the remaining structures do not represent a significant and distinguishable entity. Now, as it relates to the concrete launch pads and associated underground magazines, those two have been considerably modified. As was explained by Mr. Ostrander, the ground level steel blast doors have been removed, the concrete block structure has been built above, there are new staircases with railings, and the underground magazines have been adapted for use, and there's significant water infiltration. The next criterion, applicant does not believe that the structures represent an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, and I would key on the word visual. Again, this site as a military facility was specifically designed to reduce visibility beyond the property boundary. Structures have been safeguarded and closed off from the surrounding neighborhood. There's significant setbacks, fencing. The original rural setting itself has fundamentally changed from a rural dairy farming community to a thickly settled suburban neighborhood. And the report reasonably concludes that due to significant change over time, the facility no longer retains its setting from its original use as a Nike missile launch site or its subsequent use as a NIST annex, nor does it represent an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood, community, or city. The last criteria in this category, we do not believe that the property's existing structures over 50 years old embody design, setting, materials, workmanship, or ambiance, the city's sense of time, place, and historic development. Again, these are nondescript buildings with standardized design, common materials. The site was intentionally designed for restricted access, reduced public visibility, and to be obscured from the surroundings. As was stated in the report, the Nike missile facilities were intended to be, quote, hidden in plain sight. We've discussed the extent of the modifications by NIST for their use, the state of disrepair arising from the abandonment by the federal government, and the complete transformation of the previously rural setting. So our next argument goes to that there's no reasonable probability of designation by the mayor and city council. So the HDC under city code, if they decide to withhold the issuance of the permit, they also must find that there's a, quote, reasonable probability of historic designation, and the applicant does not believe that this reasonable probability exists because the mayor and city council currently anticipate the redevelopment of the property under the current MXD zoning. And to go through this thread, I have to start with the 1997 master plan, which you see on the screen, which recommended rezoning of the property, which at the time was RA, to MXD. And that recommendation was implemented in Ordinance 01497, which rezoned the property to MXD as part of a comprehensive rezoning. Then for years, city master planning documents anticipated the U.S. federal government would donate the W92 facility at Muddy Branch Road to the city for park use. This is reflected in the 2003 master plan, 2009 master plan, and as recently as the 2018 master plan, the associated elements. But what changed was that the U.S. federal government eventually decided to sell the property via auction in 2021 instead of donating it to the city for park use. And this shows that the city had no intention of purchasing the property via auction, it never bid on the site, and had no intent to develop it as a park, with bidders understanding in turn that the city no longer intended for the site to be a park. And this is shown by the city staff's participation in the auction process, by explaining the demolition and MXD entitlement processes to bidders, as well as answering their questions. So we believe that these circumstances support a finding that there's no reasonable probability of historic designation, because the city now anticipates that the successful bidder will redevelop the Muddy Branch site with residential uses under the MXD zone. And lastly, applicant believes that designation would deny all reasonable use of the property and cause undue economic hardship. Under the code, HGC can withdraw a directive to withhold the demo permit if the failure to grant that permit will, quote, have the effect of denying the property owner all reasonable use of the property, or would cause the property owner to suffer undue economic hardship. Existing structures are not readily adaptable to new uses, as is recognized in the staff report, are in poor condition, that's evidenced in the photos, and contain numerous hazardous materials like lead paint, mercury, asbestos, and mold. And we agree with the observation in the staff report that the property shape and layout of the existing structures are not conducive to retention. And in-place preservation would preclude economically viable redevelopment and require a private property owner to renovate severely deteriorated conditions and structures and maintain them in perpetuity at great cost. So just stepping back for a second as a practical matter, what would in-place preservation achieve here? So let's look at the launch pads and the underground magazines, which have been described as the most significant structures on the site. The dimensions of just one of those launch pads, which is concrete, is 42 feet by 63 feet, which is over 2,500 square feet. And that's just for one of the launch pads. They're flat, and the magazines are 20 feet underground, concrete structures. Again, they're located on private property, not visible from any distance, and are not readily adaptable for something useful. It would be a huge economic undertaking for a private property owner to maintain this condition in perpetuity. It would then be subject to considerable historic regulations if so designated. And also as a practical matter, it's likely to be a considerable challenge to obtain proper insurance for a private party or HOA. And we believe that if maintained in place, the facility would also still remain a target for trespassing and vandalism. This is why we believe commemoration and not in-place preservation is appropriate. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Ostrander to talk about some of the proposals for commemoration.
Yes, thanks, Phil. We had some ideas that we had talked about for commemoration of the W-92 facility in the Nike missile program. We've talked to many about designing and implementing some type of interpretive signage. We also have had a short dialogue, but dialogue nonetheless, with the Cultural Arts Advisory Committee of the City of Gaithersburg about how we might incorporate potential public art concepts that would take into account the commemoration of the W-92 facility. And lastly, we would consider salvaging some of the building components, such as the magazine doors and the steel launch pads, and make them available to donation to others, or possibly to put them as part of public art concepts.
So just to sum up in conclusion, again, we respectfully do not believe that there's significant significance to merit designation here. We believe that there's no reasonable probability of designation by the mayor and city council upon HDC petition. We believe that there'd be considerable economic harm caused by designation, and we respectfully request the HDC to instruct the city manager to issue the demolition permit without delay. And also like to just take this opportunity to thank Mr. Berger and Mr. Mann for their help and attention to this application. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, sir. Before we proceed to the public participation, let me ask the members of this commission if have any conflicts or obstacles to hearing either this case or the other two cases that are before us this evening.
I think I have.
Yes, sir.
I work for the government, and I've seen so many facilities. Like, I'll be biased. I have some that I'm trying to change because I don't like the architectural style. I don't like the materials, and particularly in the military. I work at Fort Detrick, Fort Meade, Fort Myer. I have seen so many facilities like this. Just the military is different. They're not into styles and architectural beauty. They're more practical. And I think I'm biased. Just looking at the buildings, I just want to tear it down. So I just want to state that.
Yeah, I would say if you're looking for a legal opinion,
Yeah.
To the extent that helps, if it is your judgment that you would be biased in making a judgment, then at least on this decision, you should recuse.
Okay. All right. I'll think
Because
about
that's your subjective judgment, we really can't challenge that.
Yeah, because I mean, right now I'm working on one, and it has some architectural, historical significance because it's the Air Force, it's their missile, and it's different. The architectural style, the period of the building was designed and built, it was expressed more architecturally, but looking at what I'm looking at now is different. So I mean, I may be biased in my.
Well, Commissioner Morgan, if you think that you're going to be biased in the decision on the merits of this particular case,
Yeah.
might I suggest you recuse yourself temporarily down in the audience, the other
Okay.
side of the rail.
Yeah.
And
I
that'll
just
be a
want to bring that
cleaner-
up. Yeah.
A cleaner decision and less chance of appeal that you participated in the discussion of the case.
I'll step down.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can offer an opinion as a member of the public.
Absolutely.
Like anybody else when we turn to that,
Yeah.
but
When it comes to the final decision or recommendation, I just want to state up front that I may be biased as demolishing these buildings. So
Well,
that's, yeah.
we appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
It's difficult,
Yeah.
if you would, sir.
You have to sit in the audience.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I know, you've been kicked out
Only
of
for
better
this
places.
reason.
All right, we'll proceed to the public participation, both for and against. Let me just mention very briefly ground rules. The people who may want to testify this evening is probably a universe larger than those who are here. We are also, this is a hybrid proceeding. We have people who are participating online potentially, and we have no idea how many of those folks are out there. They provided us with a gizmo here that's in front of me, 3 little lights. It gives you 3 minutes to proceed, give us your viewpoint. It'll start off as green, when 30 seconds to go, it'll go to yellow, and then go to red. The floor will not open up and swallow you at the end, but I will ask you to cut it short. So let me begin by asking if there are people who would like to speak in favor of granting the application. Yes, sir, if you would come forward, and part of the procedure will be that the deputy city attorney will actually swear you in. Could you give us your name, please?
Yes, Michael Dennis, Dennis.
And where do you live, sir?
137 Timberbrook Lane, apartment 301, Gaithersburg.
Thank you.
Basically, do you swear tell the whole
Yeah,
truth?
I'm willing to swear in.
We
We've
just
been
started
doing-
to do
Wouldn't
this.
we have also sworn in the applicant? Actually, what I would also suggest is if anybody is here who will be testifying, not the attorney, sir, but anybody providing factual testimony, if everybody would just jointly go ahead and raise your hand and repeat after me that you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, to the best of your ability and knowledge. You all swear?
I do.
Okay, thank you all.
And that
I think that will cover us.
That extends to the
Yes, it
applicant's
does.
previous testimony.
Yes,
Thank you.
our own analysis is that the attorney shouldn't, because the attorney should be arguing rather than presenting facts. But certainly anybody presenting the facts, if we're gonna do that, make sure everybody's on the same page.
The attorneys always tell the truth.
Well, but they should just be arguing. Now, for anybody virtually or online, they individually will have to be
Yes.
sworn in, because there's no other way to do them all at once.
All right. Let us proceed. Yes, sir.
First, I am an atheist, so I cannot swear, but I will
No,
affirm under the penalties of
swear or affirm, sir.
Okay, you did
So,
not say
affirm is
before.
fine. Okay,
Right.
sorry.
Let's make that clear, okay? Thank you. I'm also the president of the board of directors of Timberbrook Condominium. We are adjacent to the W92 property here. We don't have any objection to the demolition of the buildings, such as they are, which are on that property. But we do have some very consistent concerns with the logistics of the demolition process. Specifically, the entrance to Timberbrook Condominium and the entrance to the W92 property share the dead end of Muddy Branch Road. There's practically no room there. You come out of Timberbrook Lane, you turn left, you're on Muddy Branch Road, they turn left also to get out, and we're going to be sharing a lot of property here. Gaithersburg doesn't really maintain that stretch of School Drive very well. It's got several large potholes in it. Any big trucks coming through there are going to make it a lot worse, and it's going to destroy our entry into Timberbrook Lane. So we're concerned about the logistics. What's going to happen with all of the truck traffic and the noise, and the hazardous materials and the dirt and everything else which will come out of that property? How do they plan to handle that? What about noise? We have a noise bylaw in Timberbrook, and we have quiet hours. Our quiet hours are from 11 p.m. at night to 8 a.m. in the morning. We don't want to have major construction at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's a concern we would have as well that has not been addressed. We want to know what happens with the sanitary engineering and construction plans to clear up all of the dirt and stuff that comes out of there, and what dirt that flies over the trees into our property, and stormwater management as well. A lot of the water which falls into that property comes right down, because we're lower than the W92 property, onto our property. We have a problem with it now coming down, filling up some of our storm drains and into our parking lot. So what's going to happen with that? And how much of that stormwater is going to be containing the hazardous materials, which they already acknowledge exist on that property. We're concerned about that as well. We are concerned not so much with the demolition of the property, we have no problem with that, but we are concerned with what they're going to put on it and replace it with, which I guess is a conversation for another time. But I hope to have that with them at some point. But that's the end of my conversation at this point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of granting the application? Yes. And if you would give us your name and your address, please.
Yes, my name is David Batlin. I live at 210 Shadow Glen Court. I'm a member of the Lakeland Ridge Ad Hoc Committee to understand what's going on with the development of the former NIST property. I think we echo in many ways what the Timberbrook folks have said. I think it's universal, but I cannot be positive that everyone in Lakeland's Ridge would like to see those buildings be demolished. They are unsightly, they give terrible views from our homes, and they are, from our point of view, almost a nuisance. However, you know, they had historical significance possibly at some point in time, but given all the information that we now know about the site, I cannot believe that the historical significance rises to the point that we should try to keep those buildings in place. But we also are concerned about things such as stormwater management, potential of needing, silt fences put in to protect our properties during the demolition, sound issues. At Lakeland's Ridge, there is a significant retaining wall that might be impacted in some way by the development there. We know that there's already siltation that comes into that property from the NIST property. So those are typical construction things that we presume we can work out at another time, but something that I did want to voice at this point in time to maybe establish a conversation. But it would be our hope that the committee, the Historic Commission would grant this demolition permit, and that a new and hopefully more in keeping with the current neighborhood development could be established.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of granting the application? Yes, sir. Your name, please, and address.
Yes, I'm David Worcester, 137 Timberbrook Lane, Unit 302. I also am in favor of seeing this property serve in some different way than it does now. I do have concerns, like Michael expressed, about the logistics of doing the demolition. And I'd like to add to what Michael said, that the perspective of persons like myself is that there's a lot of stuff to be removed, and you also have a couple, I guess 3 burial sites on the property, and it would be all too tempting to put a lot of the building material down into the silos. I don't think that should ever be approved, and I just wanted to express that at this time, and that one watch carefully for these kind of things. We are aware of the contamination on that site. It does affect us. We've tried to discourage anyone on our property trying to do anything in the way of gardening, and that's how what's on that site right now does affect us, and the demolition process could result in seeing more concerns of what's coming down the hill to our Timberbrook community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in favor? Seeing none, I will ask if anyone here tonight is opposed to the grant of this application. Seeing none, hear none, can we explore who's online?
Yes, but first we should ask the tech team to play the video instructions.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop, and you wish to make a public comment. We can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
And we're waiting to see if anyone online wants to raise their hand. Seeing no one at the moment, we'll give them a few more seconds. And still no one, so perhaps we should move on and perhaps they'll have an opportunity later in the hearing to speak if they would choose to do so.
All right, let me go back to the applicant. Would Pleasance like to address any of the points that were made by the four gentlemen that spoke this evening?
Sure, I'll leave to Mr. Ostrander to talk about the logistics of the demolition permit. But as far as what will go there in the future, again, this property is zoned MXD, which is subject to a multi-layer entitlement process. There'll be sketch plan, there'll be schematic development plan, there'll be final site plan.
And that's not before us this evening.
Right, so there'll be ample opportunity for public participation for those future processes.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
As for the demolition process, we will be hopefully issued a permit, City of Gaithersburg, and we will proceed with, all reasonable caution to do so and be, I think, extraordinarily sensitive to our neighbors and take, reasonable steps to make sure that we act as good stewards of not only our property but theirs as well.
All right, thank you. Let me call upon the commissioners. Commissioner LaFrance.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for a very thorough presentation. That's very helpful when we're weighing evidence. I also want to say that it was a real pleasure to do a tour of the property. It was very different for me. I enjoyed it very much. I don't have any questions, but I probably have some statements. Do you want me to just do everything
Go right
now?
ahead.
I'm very supportive of the idea of salvage. You may not have thought of it before, but I thought that there were multiple light fixtures that I took pictures of that certainly there is a market for if you decided not to reuse them on the property, but you certainly could. And even some furniture. And I thought the building at 501 had some doors that may be reused somewhere or salvaged. I thought that would be an important thing to do. And then also, I know this isn't before us, but we do have a historic tree inventory in Gaithersburg, and I just want to make sure that you know that we would like you to save as many trees as you could, especially the mature ones, while designing what you're going to do. And that is all I have.
Thank you. With the policy of ladies first, Commissioner Ramirez.
I also enjoyed the presentation. I appreciate how thorough all the reports were that were included in the final agenda packet tonight. I certainly learned a lot about our history in Gaithersburg, and I thought it was significant that while it is a historic site, there were so many of them. There were 300 across 29 counties, I believe, or states. However, there wasn't a significant event that was tied to this location. I did agree with the reports that describe the property as unremarkable buildings, standardized design, and common materials having been used. It is a concern that there's so much vandalism and deterioration on the property and so much contamination. So I am actually in support.
Thank you.
Commissioner Feinstein.
Yeah, I agree with the other two commissioners. It was a great presentation. All the background material was fascinating to read, and the tour itself was highly informative. So I appreciate that. I think of the excuse me. I think of the three criteria that you list. The idea of the reasonable probability and designation by the mayor and city council. I think it's hard for us to kind of really have a feel. I know their zoning is such, but it was also set aside as a public park. Theoretically, when it was supposedly going to be given by the government to the city, which could have meant multiple things. So I don't think that's a criteria. And then the designation would deny the owner of all reasonable use of the property. That's true, but the owner knew that when they were at auction purchasing the property. That wasn't something that I think your eyes are wide open in going into that. So it comes down to, in my mind, whether the site has sufficient historical or architectural significance to merit designation. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement that there's the architectural significance is not there. It's not any kind of architectural gem by any means. I think that's pretty factual. So then it comes down to whether it's historically significant. And for me, I mean, I've been going back and forth in my head about it, and I think what I've come down to is whether something is, it's layman's term, cool, like wandering through the site and going into the silos. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And whether that means it's historic or not. And based on all the changes that have been made over time, all the other issues that have been raised in terms of contamination and all these other things, and also the fact that there are, there are so many other Nike missile sites, and that at least one, if not others, will be maintained that are in better condition than this. So there will be a historic record of the program. I don't think this particular site has merit to be historically significant. So therefore, I'm in favor. That's it.
I do all have a question, please.
Go right ahead, please.
Burial sites. I don't remember reading about that.
I think you meant the actual
The
site, the silos which you could use to bury
Oh.
dirt.
Okay.
Is that? I think that's
Just
what I
wanted
know.
to make sure there wasn't any graves on the property.
That's an entirely different issue, I believe.
Thank you.
I, of course, will go last. I am very appreciative of what we've heard this evening, and also what the applicant's consultant has produced in Exhibit 4. I invite the public to especially turn their attentions to pages 64 and 68 of that document. I think it is conclusive, as was tonight's presentation, that these buildings do not meet the standards of 24, 226, or 231. Perhaps not even when they were new, but certainly not in their present state. They've been greatly altered. They no longer reflect any Cold War era architecture or material at all. They've greatly deteriorated. The doors and the locks have been destroyed on a number of significant places. Particularly of concern to me are the subterranean facilities. They're open to whoever is able to scale the fence or find a way through. There has been little maintenance done in the past since the buildings were abandoned. There's no maintenance that I can detect at the present, and certainly there's no incentive to do it in the future if some other use is going to be made of the property. I think it's clear that there's no architectural, historical, or cultural connection with Gaithersburg itself. The architecture is, we've been sort of referring to it in polite terms, but it's the typical prefab military corrugated steel and cinder block. I wouldn't say it's neo-brutalistic, but it's pretty close. Utilitarian is a very polite way of putting it. I have a overarching concern, and that is this is an attractive nuisance. Many of the above-ground facilities are collapsing. and that's a danger, but it compares in no way to the subterranean. There is no light down there, there's water, there's mold, a lot of rusty surfaces. The potential for somebody falling and getting hurt down there is pretty great. And I know that some of the folks may say, well, why can't these kids be like we were, perfect in every way? Well, it really doesn't work that way. These are kids, they do stupid things. And the potential for somebody getting hurt and not being discovered for a good long while is I think, rather real. And as population density goes up with further development in the area, the potential is worse and worse, the risk is greater and greater. I do not wish to see somebody get hurt. Certainly not at this time. And I'd like to say that I would urge that whatever we do it promptly so that this area can be secured. Without the military to do it, there's been quite a bit of vandalism, trespassing over the past couple of years, and it's only going to increase. And I don't want anything to happen on our watch. We were not aware of this until very recently, but now we are. And I don't want it to happen. I was thinking also of a possibility instead of the suggestion of public art, which is a good possibility, and salvaging certainly, but if the applicant would consider perhaps making a feature wall incorporating some of the subterranean, the best of all of the three, perhaps that would be useful with appropriate signage. I really have nothing else that I want to offer, but I think that is a concern that should be expressed. This is an attractive nuisance, and these are kids, and they will continue to do it until something is done with the property.
We need a motion, I think.
Yeah, we need a motion, but is it worth checking to see if there's anybody else?
Yeah, no one has their hand raised, so.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion.
Okay. I move the Historic District Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony and the staff report findings and recommendation, direct the city manager.
It would be
No,
the
no.
second.
Sorry, reading the wrong ones. Didn't mean to scare you. I move that the Historic District Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony and staff report findings and recommendation, determines that the buildings over 50 years old located at 770 Muddy Branch Road do not meet the criteria for historic or architectural significance as specified in 24-226 of the City Code, and does not direct the city manager to withhold issuance of Demo 28359-2022 with conditions. And the conditions are for the commemoration, signage, art, and salvage of salvageable materials. Would anyone like to add anything to those conditions? Go ahead, Mark.
I guess an inventory of the salvageable, actually an inventory of all the items that could potentially be salvaged, so it can be determined whether it could be salvaged or not.
No, and I don't mean to interrupt your discussion. If the way
Pictorial
the way the
evidence?
statute is written, it
Yeah.
really doesn't offer the ability to issue conditions. I understand the thought process, but they certainly could be recommendations, and I think those
Okay.
recommendations would be helpful to be expressed and for not only the city manager but Department of Planning to see.
Okay.
So
So
just
we
I would
change
just
from
suggest using the term recommendation because then that
Recommendation
fits
instead
much
of
better.
condition. I understand. And was that pictorial evidence? you
Yes.
would- Yes, so any salvageable material also would have pictorial evidence.
And I guess the other condition where it's, I mean, it's obviously one that would be, the city would be doing anyway, but just
Yeah.
because it was raised here, we'd like to, not a condition, but a recommendation that obviously all hazardous material be removed in a manner that's EPA approved. And that the city will make sure that the stormwater management is in place and silt fences and all kinds of sediment and erosion control is in place to ensure that the neighboring communities are not affected by the demolition.
Yeah, these are all requirements of the demolition permit, so our
Yeah, just
commercial
wanted to
permitting
speak.
staff will be on top of that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Well, I'll do that. As I call your name, would you either say aye or nay? Commissioner LaFrance.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Roddy votes last and says aye. So 4-0, it's granted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Sorry for this. I don't know what came over me.
Commissioner Morgan, please come back. All is forgiven. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mary Jo LaFrance. But no, I do not speak French. It's my husband's side of the family, and they're French Canadian.
All right, I'd like to move on a little bit.
Beautiful.
Next is a historic area work
I
permit.
do have some French in my family. but
Docket number
still, I
HIST
never learned how to speak.
9379-2022. Do we have a presentation from staff, please?
Excuse me, but I have to get back to the board, but thank you. Always so nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
The subject building is a 2.5-story four square style residence with craftsman style details that was built circa 1920. The application comes before the HDC in accordance with section 24-227A of the city code, and we have some photos of the building supplied by the applicant. This photo is obviously the front, this is the side, and then we have a rear elevation down here in the bottom right corner. This is a representative example of the shingles, which will come into play in a moment here. But these are just some photos to show you what the property looks like.
Nope.
And the historic district guidelines for the Brooks, Russell, and Walker Historic District and individually designated sites apply. The guidelines note the following on materials: that a historic home is a living example of the past. It can offer the public a view of the styles and materials from an age of quality and craftsmanship. These homes serve as an inspiration to future generations to strive for beauty and quality. The first bullet, the historic character of a property shall be maintained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Next bullet, deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary, physical, or pictorial evidence. In the last bullet, if a material is developed in the future that can provide an appearance that is historic, it may be used on a case-by-case basis. And then roofing is another element of the design guidelines. And I'll skip to the bullet. Original material should be retained, matched, restored if possible. And second bullet, the size, shape, and texture of the original material should be matched if possible. And moving on, The applicant seeks to replace the existing zinc metal shingles with Permalock aluminum shingles, and we have a map of the roofing. So new shingles on the core of the house here, and a new standing seam roof on the rear addition here, and then there's sections of standing seam metal roof that will remain. It'll just receive a coating here on the front, and then there's a porch on the back here, and then the garage has a roof as well, but that's going to remain in place. The existing metal shingles measure 10 3/4 by 2 1/4 inches. They are in poor condition because of the presence of a modern epoxy that prevents the shingles from being recoated. The new shingles will measure 9 1/4 by 6 inches, so close in size. They will be smooth and have an embossed finish, and snow guards will be installed at the roof edge as well. And as for the standing seam metal roof, which will be in the back here, it'll be close in size to the existing. The existing has standing seams that are 17 inches apart. This one will have 16-inch space, and it will be an aluminum roof. As part of this project, the applicant will coat the tin porch on the front, as I mentioned, with a waterborne acrylic, and that work is considered maintenance and repair, so not really subject to the HDC review. Other homeowners or property owners in the district have replaced their metal shingles in the past with a barrage metal shingle, and typically that's what we'd recommend, but the applicant has provided evidence that the estimates they received for that treatment would be $100,000. So they're choosing this Permalock shingle option because it's definitely more cost effective. And here's a close-up view of how the shingles look now. As you can see, they're not in very good shape. So they may be original to the house, which was built in 1920. And here's the standing seam roof on the rear elevation that will be replaced with another standing seam roof. This gives you an idea of what the Permalock shingles will look like. They're basically one shingle. It gives the idea of 3 shingles in one. And these wall shingles here, this is provided by the applicant to give a representative example of what the roof Permalock shingles will look like. And we have the applicant here, Lori Predzgrodsky. If you can please come to the podium, state your name for the record.
Excuse me, does she have to be sworn in also?
Yeah, we'll get her name first.
Okay.
I am Lori Timos Predzgrodsky, and I am the owner, as well as my husband, Joseph Stefan Predzgrodsky, at 8 Walker Avenue.
Okay. If you want to raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to the best of your ability and knowledge?
I do.
Please proceed.
As summarized, sorry.
There's no time limit on you. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I can talk really fast though. No, we purchased this home about a year ago, and I have previously, in the past 20 years, have been restoring a arts and crafts bungalow in Hyattsville, Maryland, and my family was looking for our next project. I might have bitten off a little more than I planned, but we are, first and foremost, we were aware that the roof was in questionable shape. I included a sort of a preliminary sort of estimate on what the recommendations were to do with the roof, and that it unfortunately was no longer a candidate for recoating. And we went through a process of trying to find the most appropriate covering that would maintain this fantastic example of craftsman style Foursquare architecture. And wow, it was a real kind of eye-opener. And I had worked closely with Dana Halpert at the Maryland Trust as I put my tax credit package together to kind of look for some options that would be in our budget in a way that we could put as much as we can into this home to help improvement. It has a lot of need, and has been, it just needed a little love. So this is why we are here today, to speak to you about being able to repair our roof, or replace our roof, which has leaked in the past year.
Anyone have any questions for her while she's here?
I do. I was wondering, is there going to be a gauge difference in the material that you've suggested for the replacement of the roof?
I don't really know, because we're going from tin to aluminum, so it's a different metal.
Does anyone here know? Because aluminum's usually soft, and I guess what I'm concerned about is it going to hold up?
The product that I selected is a lifetime product. So Permalock has been in business, I think, since the 40s, and there are quite a few Permalock roofs that have lasted 70 plus years. That's kind of why I wanted to look at this particular product. Is I felt the warranty, I know that's a great hope, but that the product would be a lifetime product similar to what the intention of the original roof was.
Let me take a stab at answering your question from my viewpoint. I have precisely the same shingles that you do.
Oh, yes.
They were called turn metal, TERNE,
Yep.
an early galvanization. But the neighbor 2 doors down from me about 25 years ago he had the same shingles. He replaced them with an aluminum shingle, and it's still going strong.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they do have high grade aluminum, so it depends on the grade.
But I will say that shingle is no longer produced, the one that you have currently.
Yes.
And you can't find it anywhere unless you identify a house that's about to be destroyed. And in the demolition, if you can salvage the shingle, that's the only way you can get them.
I considered, there is I think a company in Canada that does still press those shingles. They usually do them in copper or a zinc again, because folks don't want to, the tin is no longer available, and people just don't want to recoat. And a lot of folks don't know how to recoat anymore. It's kind of a difficult thing to find. So, yeah, my hopes and dreams category is that's where I started. I was like, oh, I saw our next door neighbor 40 years ago did just that thing and put copper on their roof, and again, it ended up being like just the logistics would probably exceed $150,000, which it's too bad, really.
I also wanted to thank you for going to all the trouble to come up with a solution that looks like it will be a good fit.
Oh, thank you. I really hope so. I'm excited for this company, and I brought an example of the shingle.
Excellent.
This is what the shingle will look like, and
Would
they
you
lock.
mind passing it?
Oh, sure.
We'll
But it will be a
promise
smooth.
we'll return it.
Oh, it's okay. It'll be a smooth finish. But because this is kind of what their standard is, this was the material I could get.
Do you know if it's factory product coated?
Is the finish
factory?
factory?
Is it finished from the factory?
Yes,
Okay.
it is factory applied.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
that was a question for me. How is it a powder coat, or is it just do you know how the finish is applied on it?
I think it's a Kynar. I'm not sure. I'm sure it was it's probably sprayed on in factory, and it's a Kynar finish. The warranty for that is 40 plus years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And then similarly for the, I know we're not talking about it in great detail, for the standing seam.
Yes, correct.
Is that the same?
It would be about the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Please.
So this is called Permalock?
A Permalock.
Permalock.
Yeah.
And you described the cost for the original, which would have been over $100,000. What
Yes.
is the comparable cost for this?
The comparable cost for this is $41,000.
Oh, much better.
Much better. Oh, thank you.
With the kind of finish, what kind of color options do you have with it?
I think there's like 14 color options. I'm probably going to go with the charcoal, just because it's going to give a lot of flexibility in terms of paint colors over the years. Not just us, but you know.
We're kind of limited our color.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be a question of mine, because technically, we're not supposed to be selecting color, but when you're replacing a material that was not a coated material, is that the natural color of that material was, a certain color, or is it then within our purview to find a matching material?
It would have been
color-wise as
coated.
well?
The tin would have been coated as maintenance. It looks like above the rust that the most recent coating was a kind of a silver.
See what one,
Yeah.
All right.
Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak for or against? Yes, we have someone. Could we have your name, please?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Susan Searles, and I live at 10 Walker Avenue.
Okay.
So for, sure, sorry.
Thank you. We are swearing in everybody, so probably should have sworn in everybody in the room, but did not. So on this one, so if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me that you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as best as you can and to the best of your knowledge.
I affirm as you stated.
Okay.
Thank you.
That should work.
Susan Searles, 10 Walker Avenue. I have lived next to 8 Walker Avenue for over 20 years. And the previous owners, although good people, did not care at all about the historic value of the house. They lived there and raised a family, and it was wonderful. But for 20 years, we watched as gutters fell off and the roof, as you saw, the yellow house behind the window. I can look out that window and see the top of the roof and the condition that it's in. And we were very, very excited when the Pskrowskis moved in because we knew they had a heart for historic preservation, and they have a great deal of experience. In fact, Lori helped me with my own tax credit application, and she knows her stuff, and she does all the homework and researches everything to the small detail, as you can, I'm sure you saw. So I just wanted to say that we wholeheartedly support the replacement of this roof. You can see the condition that it's in. The previous owners put some kind of, I guess, an epoxy on there that completely rendered it compromised, and it could not be rehabilitated under any circumstances. So it's unfortunate, but I know that this family has the intent to do the right thing, both for their own home to preserve their historic asset and for the neighborhood as well. So just wanted to throw in our support for their project.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, could we see if there's anybody out in the ether that wants to say something?
I will check. And there's one person, but their hand is not raised, so.
All right. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Roddy?
Yes.
I would like to disclose that I do reside on Walker Avenue, but I don't feel that I would be biased.
Very well, thank you. Commissioner Morgan, you have any questions or comments? Did you like to make at this time?
Yes. I want to commend you for your time, your effort, your resources, and research that you put into this. Anytime someone tries to invest into a historical property, it's good for everyone. And I sure the neighbor will appreciate that, including, what's your name again?
Susan.
Susan, yeah. The building is beautiful, and I'm kind of breaks my heart that the prior owner, they put a lot into it, and you trying to invest to replace the roof is a good thing. I don't know, Mark asked a question about the color, and it looks like from looking at the photograph here on the screen, look kind of sable. So I think the gray, if you can get it close to that sable, it'll be a good thing. But I think the gray will work. And I don't know if that powder coat, it doesn't change much over time. You know.
The kind of finish holds pretty well.
Yeah. So I think from the presentation, I just want to commend you in your effort. I don't have any more question. I don't have a question. I just more of a comment. You know.
Thank you so much.
Compliment.
We are so
Yeah.
happy to be
Yeah.
here, and I am so excited to work on this
Yeah,
house.
it's a beautiful building. I really like it, and I think it will look good after the roof is replaced.
It is priceless. Like
Yeah.
the original chestnut trim is.
I don't think the microphone's gonna pick that up.
Yeah, I don't
but-
think anybody's.
Yeah. So the question I have, replacing the roof include the gutters, downspout, and everything, right? It's just a whole package.
They will.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean, you're going to see a lot of me probably over the next few years, but when I pick the paint colors for the house, which is not going to happen this year due to the price of that, we will be replacing the gutters. We will be painting the house. It might have to be sort of paced out a little bit. Yeah, especially how I do things, because I've been doing the tax credits for a really long time, is I kind of phase things so that money goes out, money comes back in, I put it back into the house, and we work that way. I'm not only planning on doing the state tax credits, but I will be using every opportunity to invest in this home so that, 50, 60, 70 years from now, it will be in fantastic shape for the next owner.
All right, that's good, and including the vent pipe I'm looking at, and that'll be addressed as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of love that has to happen, but it's an amazing home, and it's relatively intact. We pulled a pocket door out of the wall that probably has never really been used. It's in pristine condition. It's fantastic. It's a really exciting thing for us to be here. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner France, you have any questions or comments? Commissioner Ramirez.
Comments. I can't believe it's been a year. I had been meaning to come by with a plant to welcome you.
No
I'm so
worries.
sorry. The bushes that you trimmed when you first got in, that was amazing. So yes, I have a lot of appreciation for you moving in.
Thank you.
I'll be around.
No problem.
Commissioner Feinstein?
No, I appreciate what you're doing, and no concerns.
Okay.
And I have no concerns either. Looking for a motion.
I move that the Historic District Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report's findings and recommendation, grant HIST-9379-2022, finding it to be in compliance with section 24-227.2 of the City Code.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Excellent. As I call your name, would you say aye or nay? Commissioner Morgan?
Yeah.
Commissioner France?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yay.
Commissioner Feinstein?
Aye.
And Commissioner Roddy votes aye as well. 5-0. All right. Next is our resolution. A petition to the mayor and city council designate 9, 11, 13, and 15 Park Avenue and 201 Brookes Avenue as a historic district, or in the alternative 9 and 15 Park Avenue and 201 Brookes Avenue as individual sites. If I gather it correctly, this is an up or down.
Correct.
Should we discuss this ahead of time?
I'll only add that if the HDC approves this resolution, the mayor and council is tentatively scheduled to review it at its September 19th meeting. If they accept the petition, a triple public hearing would be scheduled among the HDC Planning Commission and then the mayor and council. followed by recommendations to the mayor and council by the HDC and the planning commission, and then the mayor and council would have the final say. They would take final action on the designation proposal.
You will remind us of this meeting?
I can certainly do that.
Very well. Do we wish to discuss this beforehand, or just take a vote? What is your pleasure?
I think take a vote. We've been
All right.
through it.
Do I have a motion, one way or the other?
Move,
You
move that.
do it, you were here.
Oh, okay, you need to read this?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. I move that the Historic District Commission approve the resolution titled HDC Resolution Petitioning Historic Destination of 9, 11, 13, and 15 Park Avenue and 201 Brookes Avenue as an historic district, or in the alternative 9 and 15 Park Avenue and 201 Brookes Avenue as individually designated sites.
Do I have a second for this motion?
I'll second.
If I call your name, would you aye or nay? Commissioner Morgan?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye. I know what it
Asuna.
would be tonight.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Aye.
Commissioner Feinstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Roddy also votes aye, so we don't have to vote on the second one. All right, that's 5-0.
Excellent.
Do we have any comments from staff?
I have nothing.
All right, that sounds good.
As staff, I'd say I'm glad to be back.
We're delighted to have you back.
So, the reason I'm here is that your normal council is just not feeling well, and so I kind of got a call and said, "Can you go?" I was like, Historic District Commission. How do you spell that again? Yeah, I remember. And you do. I would say that when you're here and pay attention, you do appreciate your discussions and your judgments and considerations. So
Well, we took a little
Enjoyed
polish
being
off our presentation tonight, but thank you.
I think you did fine.
Anything from the members of the commission?
Nope.
That's fine.
I noticed that the agenda tonight has adjournment down twice, so they must be in a hurry.
I will say welcome to Commissioner Ramirez, because everybody else I had worked with before, but I didn't have the chance to see before.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Very good. Well, I declare us over and out.
Nice job, John.
Here, here.